Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on what society calls normative sexuality. And honestly, what we find might just reveal some truly unexpected paths to connection. We're diving into a fascinating presentation by Jeff Benyon called Straight People 101, From Allyship to Spiritual Alliance.
So let's ask the big question. Do straight people really have it easy? To get to the bottom of this, we're going to explore the unique perspective of Jeff Benyon. Now, Jeff is a therapist and a church leader. He doesn't actually use the label gay for himself, but he describes his experience as having same-sex attraction. His primary audience here? It's other sexual and gender minorities who might look at exclusively heterosexual people and kind of assume they've got an absolute cakewalk in life. But as Jeff discovered through years of counseling and leadership, that assumption totally misses some massive hidden struggles.
Right off the bat, we need to lay down a crucial foundation. Jeff completely validates the unique, stinging pain and isolation felt by sexual and gender minorities. He acknowledges, very openly, that it is incredibly hard to experience same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria and still feel like you belong. That pain, it's real, it's distinct, and we absolutely shouldn't minimize it. But he also points out something profound. Practically everyone walking this earth knows what it's like to have a broken heart or feel completely misunderstood.
So, the central point we're going to explore today boils down to a sort of mathematical truth. When we use our unique struggles to compete in a game of who has it worse, we literally just isolate ourselves. Comparing pain literally equals more pain. Because think about it, even if you win that argument, you just end up completely alone in your suffering. But sharing pain, that equals less pain. When we can actually find common ground in our differing challenges, the load we carry becomes remarkably lighter.
All right, here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We're going to start by checking if the grass is truly greener. Then, we'll navigate the straight dating jungle, unpack the complexities hidden in straight marriages, examine some specific biological gender burdens, and finally, bring it all together to build what Jeff calls a spiritual alliance.
Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1. The grass isn't always greener. Challenging assumptions about straight lives.
Imagine what Jeff calls a burden potluck. Just picture yourself walking up to a big table where everyone has piled up their hidden life challenges. If you had to leave your own familiar struggles on the table and take an entire random bundle of someone else's hidden burdens, say their debilitating chronic back pain or maybe an emotionally abusive spouse, would you really make that trade? When we finally see the full, unedited picture of someone else's life, we almost always find we'd rather keep our own known pain than trade it for theirs.
Moving right along to Section 2, the straight dating jungle. Let's look at the hard data on modern dating.
So, Pew Research Center data shows that a whopping 47% of Americans agree that dating is significantly harder now than it was just a decade ago. And for women using dating apps, it can literally be a nightmare. The data highlights incredibly high rates of harassment. We're talking being called offensive names, getting explicit images they definitely didn't ask for, or even facing physical threats. Being pursued by hundreds of matches really isn't some fairy tale when so many of those interactions turn out to be completely toxic.
And then, looking at the other side of this dating app hellscape, we see the sheer crushing volume of rejection that exclusively heterosexual men have to endure. To put this in perspective, a guy might start by expressing interest in nearly 2,500 women just to get a tiny handful of actual dates. It's a brutally steep funnel. In fact, out of thousands of swipes, men see a reciprocated interest of only about 13%. Just 13%! Studies are explicitly linking this modern dating environment to deep social anxiety, depression, and just profound isolation. Waking up every single day hoping to meet the one, only to face constant algorithmic rejection, that is a uniquely heavy weight to carry.
Which brings us to Section 3, complexities of straight marriage. It's time to break that happily ever after illusion. Even inside a covenant marriage, there are startling, hidden issues that can totally derail a healthy connection. You know, that Victorian happily ever after ideal, it actually causes massive pressure. Some marriages are built entirely on physical attraction, which, let's be honest, inevitably fades, forcing couples to basically rebuild from scratch. Others face intense isolation from controlling spouses, or they secretly battle paraphilias, which are these unconventional sexual attractions that create immense shame and confusion within an exclusive marriage.
Here's just one heartbreaking example of the silent suffering Jeff sees in his therapy practice: vaginismus.
This is a physical condition that causes extreme pain and literally prevents intercourse. What happens is spouses often fall into these awful cycles of blame, thinking, well, if you really loved me, this would work. It's a powerful example of how straight people can experience incredibly deep forms of sexual brokenness and despair, all while keeping it completely hidden from the outside world.
Jeff uses this brilliant chocolate bar analogy to explain another hurdle. For many, becoming sexually active in marriage is like taking that very first bite of an amazing chocolate bar. The genie gets out of the bottle, so to speak. It awakens these intense, powerful desires that are supposed to be directed entirely at one person forever. But human nature is messy, right? Even guys married to the most beautiful supermodels in the world have been known to cheat. Marriage just doesn't magically flip a switch and turn off complex, wandering temptations. Let's transition into Section 4, Biology and Gender Burdens. We're going to look at the anatomical and temperamental divides.
Psychologists refer to a very specific phenomenon as the tragedy of the male sex drive. Biologically speaking, the male reproductive strategy is wired for endless variety, which means there's often no amount of sex that ever truly feels like enough. Furthermore, Jeff notes that straight men face massively heightened temptations to act out, like viewing pornography, precisely in those moments when they feel inadequate or when their masculinity is being challenged in a relationship.
On the flip side of that coin, we have hypergamy. This is the deeply rooted biological and social drive for women to seek the highest status made possible to ensure safety and security for potential offspring. While it's perfectly natural, it creates severe dating asymmetries. For example, a highly successful woman at, say, Yale Law School usually wants to date someone at or above her status. But that shrinks her dating pool dramatically, because the successful men at her level aren't necessarily factoring in her career status when they look for a partner.
And then there's this deeply hidden need that straight men have. Just think about ice fishing for a second. Humor me. Sitting in a freezing hut for hours on end just to be with other guys. Why on earth do they do it? Well, because men have a desperate biological need, driven partly by the hormone vasopressin, for same-sex platonic bonding through shared struggle. Straight men often lack the vocabulary for emotional intimacy, so they contrive these extreme freezing cold situations literally just to be close to their friends. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Building a Spiritual Alliance, moving past worldly concepts to covenantal strength.
Jeff talks a lot about leavening, how we can actually lift each other up. For instance, because straight men often bond by doing things and struggle to talk about their feelings, a man experiencing same-sex attraction, who might naturally be more verbally and emotionally expressive, can be a profound gift to a straight friend. He acts almost like a native speaker, tutoring someone in a foreign language. Similarly, women experiencing same-sex attraction often feel way less pressure to conform to strict visual beauty standards, and that perspective can offer incredibly refreshing, non-competitive relief to straight women who feel crushed by the pressure to perform. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this shift in mindset. The worldly concept of allyship often assumes one party is weak and victimized, and they just need the protection of the strong. But Jeff proposes something way better, a spiritual alliance. This is a two-way street based on mutual strengthening. It acknowledges that literally everyone, straight or gay, married or single, carries heavy, hidden burdens. We physically and spiritually need each other's unique perspectives just to survive.
Ultimately, the scriptures teach us that that same sociality which exists among us here will exist among us there in eternity. Building a spiritual alliance means taking our different challenges, pooling our unique gifts, and actually knitting our hearts together in genuine unity, right here and right now.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. When we finally stop playing the comparing pain game and recognize the hidden burdens that everyone carries, everything changes. So how will your unique struggles become the exact tool needed to build a spiritual alliance with those around you today?